Jenny Walsh was halfway through tightening a loose conduit when she heard the unmistakable sound of boots marching down the corridor outside her workstation. She hummed to herself as she wiped some grease from her hands onto a rag. The metallic clanks grew louder and more frequent with each passing second. "Hey, hun," Jenny called out in greeting without looking up. When there was no immediate response, she glanced over at the large shadow blocking most of the light coming through the doorway. The Xera Catheri's armored body loomed even farther than usual as she paused outside Jenny's work area to inspect the surrounding environment for any potential threats. Her black eyes scanned every corner and crevice with an intensity that would make anyone flinch, but not Jenny Walsh. Her easy smile remained unchanged. "Everything okay out there?" asked Jenny, standing up straight and dusting off her coveralls. The sound of metal grating against the floor was almost deafening in comparison to the station's usual hum of activity, another reminder that the Xara hadn't been a part of their team for very long compared to most other Cathari who served here. The Xera's expression barely wavered. "Affirmative," she replied tersely, though her tone held an undercurrent of something more, a slight confusion or curiosity that only Jenny seemed capable of noticing despite the warrior's stoic exterior. Jenny nodded and returned to work without another word. The silence between them was brief. It never lasted long, because there were always conduits needing attention or pipes leaking somewhere in need of a quick fix from her steady hand. She found herself glancing back up every now and then just for the chance to see the Xara again, even if only briefly. When she finally finished tightening what seemed like an endless stream of bolts on one last conduit, Jenny stretched out her arms above her head with a satisfied sigh before reaching into her tool belt once more. It was during this moment that the Xara passed by closer than usual and walking directly past where Jenny stood rather than lingering in the doorway or nearby. "Hey," Jenny called out again cheerfully, as she noticed how close their paths had become, causing a few stray technicians to jump back into hiding behind walls. "Love the armor," she added with an appreciative nod towards the Xara's ceremonial gear, which was designed for both intimidation and protection, a combination that made sense on Cathari battlefields, but seemed somewhat out of place amid the station's usual hustle and bustle. The room fell deathly silent almost immediately following Jenny's comment. Every eye turned to watch as the Xara slowed her pace considerably, turning halfway back around towards Jenny while still moving with a predatory grace that kept everyone in awe yet simultaneously fearful enough not to make any sudden movements near this fierce warrior. "What did you call me?" the Cathari asked slowly and deliberately through gritted teeth. A muscle twitched faintly under one of her eyes, but otherwise there was no other outward sign she had been affected by Jenny's words. "Cute," said Jenny brightly, with a small laugh escaping past her lips, as though it were nothing out of the ordinary to praise such a revered soldier for being adorable, though in truth, this was far from how most people typically addressed the Xara. "The little skull designs on your shoulder there," she explained while pointing towards what appeared like an intricately carved emblem near where their shoulders met within the armor's plating. "Adorable," Jenny continued with a friendly smile still painted across her face. The Xara stood absolutely motionless for several long seconds after hearing this, even more so than usual when faced with some unanticipated situation. She had never been called cute before in all of her life, nor did she know how to react properly now that someone actually referred to her like such a term was something positive rather than offensive. Dead silence enveloped the hallway once again, until the Xara turned back around fully and continued walking towards whatever destination lay ahead without further comment or interaction. But Jenny remained where she stood, still smiling despite feeling slightly puzzled herself at how poorly received what would normally be seen as an innocent compliment could end up being interpreted by certain individuals. The corridor echoed with the sound of boots striking against metal planks long after the Zara had disappeared from sight down a nearby junction, leaving behind only curious looks and whispers exchanged among those who witnessed it all happening. For Jenny, however, there was no time for pondering over why such an offhand remark might have caused so much disturbance amongst others. She still had many more conduits to fix before the day ended completely. Her task-oriented nature pushed her right back into work mode as she set about putting away tools and checking other nearby machinery, just in case anything else needed immediate repair. As usual, no one dared approach until after dark, when Jenny left for home, thus leaving behind yet another unique chapter in their unusual relationship that would remain unspoken of by anyone but herself moving forward from here on out. And the Xera has no idea what's happening. No one has ever called her cute. Jenny Walsh's day was off to an unusual start when she walked into the bustling maintenance bay of the space station. The air hummed with activity as technicians worked on various pieces of machinery under bright fluorescent lights that flickered intermittently, casting a yellowish glow over everything around them. The smell of metal and oil mixed with something faintly sweet from distant cafeteria filled the room. "Hey there," Jenny called out to one of her colleagues, wiping sweat off her forehead with the back of her hand as she approached him near an open panel on a nearby wall. "Mind if I take a look at this for you?" Her voice was cheerful and unapologetic, immediately drawing smiles from those around them. The technician nodded gratefully and handed over his tools before stepping aside to let Jenny work. She slipped her hands into the small opening in the machinery and began carefully examining the inner workings, making notes on her tablet as she went along. Meanwhile, a shadow passed through one of the nearby doors leading deeper into the station's corridors. The Xara, the Cathari warrior commander, moving silently towards where Jenny was stationed. Her armor clanked softly against itself with each step she took, despite its overall stiffness and size, evidence that even this intimidating figure had moments of mechanical failure just like anyone else. "Jenny," the Xera called out quietly once she reached the maintenance bay's perimeter, her tone almost hesitant as it rang through the metallic environment. She halted about 10 feet away from where Jenny was crouched over a piece of machinery and shifted slightly in place while scanning for any immediate danger or signs that she shouldn't be there. Jenny looked up at the Xera's sudden presence with mild surprise, but her usual cheerful demeanor quickly returned to mask anything else. "Oh, hiya, hun," she greeted warmly, as if it were perfectly normal and expected to see a towering warrior in elaborate armor standing just beyond the machinery where Jenny was working. "Your equipment malfunctioning?" the Xera asked slowly, trying to understand why this piece of gear needed repair by someone like Jenny rather than being sent back through standard channels for service. Her voice retained its usual cold edge, but curiosity edged into it nonetheless. After all, she hadn't expected any direct interaction with the human. "Yup," replied Jenny without missing a beat. "Just need some adjustments here and there." She straightened up from her kneeling position to face the Xera directly now that their eyes met again under the harsh lights above them. The Zara's expression remained inscrutable, but she stepped closer into better range so they could speak more clearly without shouting across distances. "Can you handle this repair?" There was an almost reluctant curiosity behind her question, mixed with something else, perhaps surprise that anyone would even try to fix such intricate alien equipment manually. "Sure thing," Jenny replied confidently, as if it were no different from handling any other task she had on her list for today. She started towards the Xara, who instinctively raised one hand defensively before remembering there was nothing threatening about this particular human's intent. "Actually, I need to take a look at your armor first," continued Jenny after reaching the Xara's side. The Xara blinked sharply once in response before lowering her guard somewhat and looking down towards where the supposed problem lay with renewed interest. It seemed one of the many complex gears within her armored plating had become jammed, likely due to prolonged use without proper maintenance cycles performed by station engineers instead of her own crew back home. "Standard procedure would be sending this directly to an armory," said the Xara carefully, feeling almost compelled to explain why such a situation required something more formal rather than casual assistance on the spot from someone who wasn't even equipped for combat repairs, as far as she could tell. "Why do you insist on fixing it here?" "Well," Jenny answered pragmatically, with another smile creeping onto her face despite being slightly out of breath now after all that running around earlier today. "The armory's full and they've got a backlog already. Probably take days for someone to get this sorted there anyway." She gestured vaguely in the direction she spoke about. "So let me just give it a quick once-over right here." The Xara paused briefly before nodding slightly without completely understanding why or how, but trusting that Jenny's approach might actually work better than waiting on bureaucracy elsewhere for immediate repair needs like this one. "All right," the Xara agreed finally, as she slowly lowered herself to sit down against a nearby wall where her armor could rest more securely while still allowing freedom of movement if necessary. She watched silently as Jenny began rummaging through various tools hanging at the waist in her tool belt, pulling out small screwdrivers and other specialized items suited for intricate work. "Alrighty then," said Jenny brightly once she had what she needed ready to go. "Just sit tight here while I take a look inside your armor." She knelt down beside the Xara now that there was space between them both on either side of where the issue lay within her suit. The Xara shifted slightly again, finding herself unaccustomed to sitting still like this around anyone besides fellow warriors back home during rare moments outside battle training. But rather than objecting further or moving away, she simply allowed Jenny access as if it were nothing out of place. "Do you mind telling me a bit about your world?" asked Jenny conversationally, while gently manipulating one of the small gears that had been causing her trouble initially, listening intently for any sounds indicating how well or poorly this piece was meshing with its counterparts. "I'm always curious about different places we visit here." The Xara paused mid-shift as if surprised by such a request. She didn't expect anyone to be interested in casual conversation like this while also working on equipment critical enough for her survival missions back home. Yet the human's words carried no mockery or hidden meaning, only genuine curiosity mixed with friendly tone. "I come from Cathari," the Xara began slowly, after gathering herself and trying to think of how best to answer these unexpected queries during what should have been nothing more than technical assistance for her equipment. "A place where survival relies heavily on strength, both physical and mental," she continued as Jenny went about fixing the malfunction without breaking concentration. "Sounds intense," responded Jenny honestly, while slipping another screwdriver into tighter spaces with practiced ease under the Xara's armor. She seemed completely unfazed by such information, which struck the Xara oddly given how most others reacted when learning of her origin or rank amongst those who knew what Cathari was really like. The Xara watched silently as Jenny worked, finding it almost impossible to stay entirely still while she continued asking questions interspersed between repair progress updates, like whether there were specific types of environments on their home planet and how that affected everyday life out there. It wasn't just idle chit-chat either. The human clearly wanted genuine answers rather than vague responses. "Have you had a chance to try any local food around here?" Jenny suddenly switched topics mid-repair with another friendly query towards the Xara, still focused intently on her work as she loosened one of the jammed components. "Or maybe some snacks?" The Xara blinked once more at this abrupt change, but decided against questioning why such a sudden switch in conversation was happening. Clearly, Jenny moved from topic to topic freely and expected others to follow suit without hesitation. "I rarely indulge outside necessities," the Xara replied, with another look towards the ground beneath her feet, as if remembering times when she too had lived more strictly according to regimented schedules back home, rather than enjoying casual downtime here on stations among other species. But, Jenny encouraged softly, after finishing up whatever minor adjustments were needed and standing straighter now, looking directly into the Xara's eyes with curiosity. "Your offer of a snack seems appealing," admitted the Xara quietly but honestly, as if realizing something about herself she hadn't noticed before this moment. She didn't hate the idea despite knowing such things weren't part of her usual routine anymore since coming here for missions rather than living on Cathuri proper. Jenny clapped once happily in response, already reaching out to grab a small bag from nearby where she kept personal snacks during shifts like these long ones. "You've got great taste then," Jenny told the Xara cheerfully, while pulling out several individually wrapped cookies before offering one directly toward the Cathuri warrior sitting calmly beside her. "Here you go, hun," said Jenny warmly, as the Xara accepted the cookie gingerly between fingers that didn't often touch anything so small or delicate anymore. She brought it closer to her face and sniffed curiously at its scent before hesitantly biting into one corner, a flavor unfamiliar but also surprisingly pleasant. The Xara paused mid-chew, then, looking up towards Jenny again, as if realizing something significant despite herself, perhaps for the first time in a long while outside battles or formal assignments here on distant stations. The human's casual kindness felt almost comforting amidst usual regimented routines and expectations back home, where such interactions would never occur. "Thank you," the Xara said quietly, after swallowing, her voice softer than earlier yet holding genuine gratitude, even if she couldn't quite place why exactly it mattered so much to be treated normally in this moment rather than as an object of awe or fear due solely to status among others around here. Jenny smiled brightly at that acknowledgement, reaching out again with another cookie held out for the Xara, who accepted it once more after her initial one had been finished. "No problem," Jenny replied simply before returning back fully into the repairs on the Xara's armor, now completed temporarily until further inspection could confirm everything worked properly without issues. As they continued to work together side by side, something shifted between them both that neither quite understood yet felt oddly familiar despite being entirely new, a bond forged through casual interaction and mutual respect rather than grand gestures or formal declarations of alliance. And in this moment, amidst the hums of machinery around them under flickering lights above, everything else seemed distant as they focused solely on each other's presence without fear or reservation. "And the Xara eats a cookie. It's the first sweet thing she's had in years. She doesn't hate it." The Xara sat alone at a corner table in the officers' mess hall, her plate half empty as she picked apart a piece of meat with mechanical precision and uncharacteristic silence. The hall was bustling around her. Humans mingled animatedly, their chatter filling every corner, but somehow not touching the Zara's space like it always did. Her reminder that even here in the heart of humanity's domain, she remained an outsider. Jenny Walsh plopped down across from her with a cheerful grin stretched wide and said, "Mind if I sit?" Zara paused mid-bite but didn't look up immediately. When their eyes finally met, the Zara blinked slowly before nodding curtly, though the gesture was far less dismissive than usual due to Jenny's persistent presence throughout her recent stay. "Sure," replied the Zara after a moment, setting down her utensils as if she needed both hands free for something else entirely. Her gray skin reflected even the dim lighting overhead, while dark eyes scanned curiously but warily around them before settling back on Jenny again. "Well then," began Jenny brightly, without waiting for more words from the Zara, who merely watched silently until finally speaking herself, breaking weeks of social silence with just one word: "Why?" Jenny chuckled lightly and replied easily, "All the other tables are full of boring people. I figured we could be a little less boring." The Xara stared blankly for half a heartbeat longer before conceding inwardly to some unknown shift inside her own mind or heart, she didn't know which, and continued eating slowly as Jenny settled in across from her, seemingly oblivious even now. "So," said Jenny eventually, after finishing her drink and wiping grease smudges off hands on coveralls, "tell me about warrior culture." The Xara's mouth opened slightly at the abrupt shift, but no words came immediately. She was used to talking about strategy or battle tactics, never casual conversation meant only for enjoyment rather than survival. "Why do you ask?" the Zara finally responded, voice still quiet, though more conversational this time. "I'm curious," Jenny admitted with a shrug that belied any lack of seriousness behind her question. "You're the first Cathari I've really gotten to know well enough for such stuff." The Zara considered that statement silently before answering slowly, deliberately choosing her words carefully despite no longer being in combat mode. "Our culture values strength and courage above all else," the Zara began steadily but softly. "Warriors are expected from birth until death to hone skills meant exclusively for protection of our people or expansion of territory." Jenny nodded thoughtfully while listening intently, absorbing every detail given with keen interest rather than casual dismissal like so many did when hearing about Cathari ways. "Sounds intense," said Jenny finally. "I guess it's not all battles and glory though, right?" The Zara looked up sharply, but only shrugged minutely in response, as if she herself hadn't truly considered that question until now. Either a rare instance of vulnerability exposed through simple curiosity alone rather than any deeper emotional connection the Xara might still struggle admitting even internally. "No," answered the Xara, again after another pause. "There are many responsibilities outside battle, but they all ultimately serve the greater purpose." "Huh," said Jenny thoughtfully, her eyes narrowing slightly as she pondered that answer further before asking tentatively yet sincerely, "Do you ever miss any other parts of life back home?" The Zara blinked again at such an unusual query, then shook her head firmly, but not dismissively. "No part that does not pertain to duties," the Xara replied honestly. Her response was honest, direct, yet somehow still open enough to indicate there might be more beneath the surface, neither wanted addressed directly yet acknowledged implicitly by continued presence alone rather than abrupt departures typical elsewhere when faced with such unusual conversations. Before Jenny could respond further, however, an imposing figure approached from across the hall: Admiral Karen Thalivac. His broad shoulders and stern demeanor immediately commanded attention regardless of context or company, present a quality rarely unnoticed given his rank, but today especially so, as he paused near their table after catching sight of Jenny speaking freely with the Tsar. "Miss Walsh," greeted Admiral Tholivac formally yet coldly, clearly disapproving despite any social niceties expected between ranks. "Commander, you should know better than to allow shiz not bothering me," interrupted the Tsar sharply, though far more calmly than usual towards anyone other than Jenny alone now. Admiral Tholivac blinked in surprise at such direct dismissal from his own officer, yet even he couldn't deny the obvious truth when both women sat comfortably without fear or tension evident between them despite any expectations otherwise. With one last glare across table before leaving again, however, it was clear nothing had truly been resolved, except perhaps for the Zara herself, who visibly relaxed back into seat now more fully engaged despite initial social discomfort still lingering faintly. "Your admiral seems a little grumpy," Jenny commented softly once the man was out of earshot. "Don't worry about him, though," the Xera snorted quietly, her gray skin reflecting amusement rather than anger this time. She turned back to Jenny directly and asked bluntly, "What is human cookie?" Jenny laughed openly at that queer, surprised yet delighted by genuine interest shown despite the Zara's usual dismissive or intimidating demeanor towards lesser beings. "A sweet treat humans enjoy often," explained Jenny cheerfully while reaching into bag near her hand once more and pulling out another cookie to offer across table as if making up for lost time previously. "You like them?" The Xara took the offered food gingerly again, but seemed far less hesitant this time around, more curious than apprehensive about unfamiliarity. She bit carefully into corner of crinkled wrapping paper, then tasted sweet confection within slowly, eyes narrowing slightly as flavor spread across tongue before nodding finally, after chewing thoughtfully for several long seconds. "Interesting." Jenny beamed proudly at that simple acknowledgement, but didn't push further explanation, knowing well enough when curiosity was genuine rather than forced merely out of politeness or obligation. "And how do humans enjoy such things?" asked the Xara curiously now, her voice softer still, though not exactly timid, merely less commanding and more curious about everyday human habits that seemed so foreign yet oddly appealing at times. Jenny smiled warmly again while replying easily, "Usually just for fun or celebration, really. Simple pleasures." The Zara considered those words carefully, then nodded once in apparent agreement, her gaze softening slightly, even as she remained guarded outwardly still against revealing too much emotion openly despite growing comfort level now around Jenny alone. "Simple," echoed the Xara quietly, almost to herself, but with no less sincerity present behind such casual utterance. It felt significant somehow, although reasons why eluded clear understanding right away. Like many other aspects of human existence she observed here, amidst bustling station life filled mostly by others afraid or intimidated to approach directly, as Jenny had. "Yep," confirmed Jenny brightly then, seemingly oblivious even now despite the Zara's rare momentary introspection. "Simple can be surprisingly good." The Xara stared blankly again, but this time with less confusion and more appreciation. She didn't know how to process such emotions still bubbling beneath surface yet felt increasingly important regardless. "Thank you," she said quietly, at last, after swallowing another bite of cookie slowly, her gray skin reflecting genuine gratitude despite no clear reason for it beyond casual human interaction, unlike typical grand gestures or formal declarations expected among warriors back home, who rarely treated each other with such unassuming kindness, let alone strangers. from different worlds entirely. Jenny looked up sharply then, but merely shrugged casually. In return, no problem. I'm just glad someone else around here isn't afraid to talk. Xara blinked at that unexpected honesty, yet nodded shortly, without additional words necessary, though there was an unmistakable warmth present between them now, despite ongoing mystery surrounding such unusual bond formed purely through casual interactions rather than shared missions or formal alliances. And with that, their conversation continued seamlessly into late afternoon hours as machinery hummed softly overhead and faint lights flickered intermittently around hallways outside, where countless others still feared approaching the Zara's table. Yet none so intimidated by her presence now like Jenny alone had ever been from first moment they'd met amidst chaos of station repairs needing attention. And Jenny has become her only friend. She doesn't know how to process this. Xara stood at her quarters door, fingers hesitating over the entry pad as she wondered if this was wise. The tiny skull keychain lay tucked safely within a small pocket of her ceremonial armor, its presence both comforting and bewildering in equal measure. Why do I feel so unsure? Xara muttered to herself, stepping back slightly from the door. She had never felt like this before. Uncertainty gnawed at her usually sharp mind, and she couldn't shake it off. Jenny's unexpected kindness lingered heavily on her thoughts, making her stomach churn with a mixture of curiosity and something deeper. She took another deep breath, pushing open the heavy metal doors to her quartershire sanctuary among chaos. The room was dimly lit by soft blue lights embedded in the walls, casting long shadows over sleek furniture arranged for maximum efficiency rather than comfort. A large holoscreen hummed quietly on one side of the room, displaying tactical maps and mission reports she rarely glanced at anymore since joining Jenny's casual afternoons. "The Zara?" A hesitant voice called out from behind her as the door hissed shut softly. She turned to see Jenny standing in the doorway with an apologetic smile stretched across her face. "I know I shouldn't be here," she began, stepping forward slowly and holding up small hands defensively. "But you seemed off last night, and something told me, hun." Xara interrupted gently but firmly, gesturing for Jenny to enter fully. The maintenance tech hesitated a moment longer before pushing the door open wider with a determined smile. "I thought this would cheer you up," exclaimed Jenny brightly as she crossed over quickly into room center and brandished out her gift excitedly, a tiny skull cane hanging from worn leather string now resting loosely in one hand. Xara stared down at it blankly, fingers curling slightly around edges of holoscreen monitor instead. No one had ever given her anything like this before. Warriors didn't receive cute things. It was confusing and made her heart flutter oddly inside chest where no beating organ resided. "Saw it and thought of you," Jenny explained eagerly, moving closer until Xara could feel warmth radiating off her petite form despite distance between them still quite significant by Kothari standards. Xara swallowed hard against rising tension in throat. "Warriors, don't cry," she said hoarsely, at last, after a long moment of awkward silence, filled only with hummed machinery sounds outside door and faint glow reflecting off smooth surface walls around room. Jenny looked up sharply, eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to gauge sincerity behind Xara's rigid stance. "Everyone cries, sometimes though," she responded softly but firmly, like an old truth Jenny knew intimately well, even among those who didn't understand such concept fully yet themselves. The Zara blinked slowly, her sharp features softening just barely beneath surface hardness, typical warrior facade maintained, always around others except now with Jenny, alone it felt different somehow. Loneliness coiled and got tight as realization dawned through hazy barriers she usually kept firmly closed against emotional intrusions. "I am lonely," the Zara admitted quietly, almost to herself, but volume carried enough for Jenny's keen ears to catch easily, amid soft hums around them both. Jenny blinked back, surprise flitting across face swiftly before melting into understanding empathy. She stepped closer then, without hesitation, and wrapped arms carefully around strong Kothari frame. Despite physical disparity between their sizes, the Zara taller by far, but lacking innate fear now toward Jenny's touch that humans often carried around apex predators. "Hey," whispered Jenny soothingly against the Xara's armored shoulder, where leather straps crisscrossed intricately for maximum protection and practicality rather than comfort. "Everyone feels alone sometimes, even me." Her warm breath tickled scales there briefly before drawing back gently once more to allow space between them again, while holding gaze steady with soft eyes. The Zara stared down at Jenny, the smaller woman's hands lingering lightly on leather straps, as if afraid letting go would break delicate connection formed so suddenly. Never had she felt anything like this. Emotions swirled inside her in dizzying whirlwinds of warmth and confusion. "Thank you," the Xara said again quietly, after swallowing thickly against throat constrictions, not fully understanding why such simple acts seemed to mean so much more now than ever before. Jenny beamed brightly, yep at towering feet, restanding stiffly, but no longer radiating fear or intimidation like usual among her crewmates, who avoided engaging directly despite shared space aboard station. "Anytime," she replied warmly, nodding once firmly, in silent agreement that something meaningful shifted between them today beyond casual conversation and awkward gifts. The Xera's armor felt suddenly too tight around heart region where no physical organ resided, but emotional impact echoed strongly nonetheless. For the first time ever, cracks showed through hardened exterior, or polished smooth by centuries of battle scars and unyielding warrior code. Cracks showing true vulnerability beneath toughened surface she usually kept firmly guarded against all intrusion. "Everyone cries sometimes," repeated Jenny softly once more before turning away toward door with small smile still etched gently on face. "Just means you're human." As door slid shut behind maintenance tech's retreating form, the Xara stood rooted in place for several long minutes, letting emotions swirl inside her freely without usual barriers of fear or intimidation, pushing them back down into depths where they couldn't intrude upon daily routine anymore. "Simple," she murmured to herself at last as shadows lengthened around room edges and hums from machinery outside gradually faded to background noises once more. Simple human interactions had cracked armor worn proudly by legendary warrior like no enemy ever could or would likely manage, no matter how formidable battlefield threats posed outwardly compared against Kothari might alone. And with that, chapter ended exactly as Plot B described, leaving the Xara alone amidst sanctuary of personal quarters to process strange new emotions bubbling up from deep within heart region where physical organ didn't reside, but still felt deeply connected somehow now. The station's alarms blared through every corridor and room like a deafening symphony of warning tones and urgent messages. Jenny Walsh was working on her feet when she heard them, first as low thrumming in the background, then escalating into an ear-splitting wail that made her skin crawl with premonition. "Another day, another repair job," muttered Jenny to herself, wiping sweat from her brow with one hand while tightening a loose panel connector with the other. She had just finished securing it when the emergency intercom crackled to life. Station personnel, is command. Pirates are inbound and targeting critical sections of our station. Secure yourselves immediately. Jenny's heart skipped, but she didn't falter. Not even pirates would scare her off a good fixed job, no matter how urgent. Instead, she turned to the nearest group of workers. Hans, Jenny called out with false cheer as everyone around her exchanged worried glances and began hurrying in various directions for shelter. Head down to level D now, unless you're absolutely essential here today. She paused, looking directly at a couple who hesitated by an airlock hatch. You two get moving, she insisted firmly. The pair nodded once sharply before dashing off towards the stairs leading below decks, leaving Jenny alone amidst scattered tools and half-repaired machinery. All right, she muttered to herself, while gathering her wrenches into a pile against one wall of what passed for an office space down here. Let's see how these pirates like getting their ship parts fixed with fists. She slipped on thick gloves designed more for protection than delicate workmanship, then headed out towards the corridor entrance. As she stepped outside into dimly lit hallways crisscrossed with emergency lighting and flickering shadows cast by distant fire alarms, Jenny's eyes quickly adjusted to surroundings. The metallic walls felt cold beneath her fingertips, where they brushed against handholds or door frames, a long way down narrow passageways winding deeper towards heart of station. Maintenance, she whispered more to herself than anyone else nearby could overhear through layers of armor and panic-driven shouts of distant coworkers trying to find safety within confines of their own quarters. No one expects me here. Suddenly, the familiar sound of bootsteps racing down metal grating caught her attention, heavier than hers by far, yet steady with practice speed reflecting decades spent mastering art of war rather than peacetime labor like Jenny's routine. Commander the Zara, breathed Jenny in surprise, but without fear, as armored warrior emerged from corner further ahead, dark eyes scanning quickly before locking onto maintenance tech standing ready and waiting near junction point dividing station into multiple wings. Heading where? Weapons storage room, replied the Xera tersely yet not without acknowledging nod towards direction chosen by human technician, now facing opposite way. Keep going then, it'll be all right here for a bit. Jenny's grin was wide despite tension rising around them, radiating unshakable confidence, even in face of imminent attack threatening entire station. But before the Zara could respond further or confirm any sense of agreement based on orders from higher command levels, now drowned out by chaos overwhelming comm system, lights flickered again, and then died entirely as power grid began failing under strain induced by pirate raiders targeting primary generator banks nearby in attempt to cripple defense mechanisms designed around this central hub. Come with me, ordered the Zara abruptly, but without hesitation. You aren't trained for combat. No, Jenny retorted sharply, eyes narrowing slightly at unspoken implication that she wasn't worth protecting if things went south fast here soon. But before either woman could continue disagreement any further on this point, both had faced off against stubborn personalities far more lethal than mere words ever could bait. Became immediately clear what lay ahead of them. From shadowed depths beyond main intersection, low growls reverberated through metal corridors like ominous beasts waking from long slumber. Then came sound of footsteps, a lot of them rushing towards their location, with heavy thuds against grating beneath boots and armored feet alike, while clashing voices shouted commands in unfamiliar tongue that sent shivers down spines despite best efforts to remain calm under pressure. "Pirates!" hissed Jenny instinctively, but also practically. "Ready." The Zara moved first, drawing out bladed weapon from within folds of armor, almost fluidly like snakes striking prey, without hesitation or remorse. Around them darkness closed in rapidly as emergency lighting flickered weakly before failing completely, leaving only dim glows from safety panels and blinking red warning lights to guide their path forward. "Follow me," the Zara directed once more, but this time with slightly less authority behind voice now that Jenny had proven she was capable of handling herself against threat posed by invading force. Together they pressed onward towards weapons cache, moving cautiously yet swiftly as best conditions allowed for maneuvering through tight quarters and sharp turns leading deeper into station's core sections. But just before reaching destination, a final corridor separating them from safety of fortified bunker where supplies waited to arm themselves properly. Sound of battle grew louder beyond threshold, dividing their current space with next one ahead. Gunfire crackled rapidly, followed closely by shouts and screams as pirates managed break through initial defenses, despite best efforts made thus far to hold line against advancing enemy forces. "We have company," Jenny observed dryly yet without panic, eyes scanning quickly around them for any way out or other routes they could take, but finding none immediately obvious given layout of station corridors designed more for maintenance access than rapid evacuation under attack conditions. "Stay behind me," the Zara commanded again, even as she began sprinting down final stretch towards entrance to bunker door where weapons waited, knowing that every second counted now and delay here risked compromising mission entirely. Yet Jenny's feet remained firmly planted on ground, despite encouragement from Kothari warrior racing ahead, her eyes narrowing instead into fierce determination. "No way," she said calmly yet resolutely. "I'm helping. Untrained civilians errant. I hit pirates before you ever could with wrenches," interrupted Jenny, lifting one up now as if to demonstrate point even though there were no targets immediately visible within reach. Her smile was fierce and unapologetic, completely confident in own abilities despite lacking traditional combat training. "And you'll keep doing it until we get where weapons are supposed to be." The Zara hesitated only fraction of a second longer before nodding sharply. "On see no need for words here either, as action spoke louder than any command could ever convey under circumstances like these." Together they burst through final door into small armory room, still locked down tightly despite emergency protocols now activating automatically, lights flickering on dimly from built-in emergency power supply providing just enough illumination to see shapes and outlines of various arms lying scattered across floor in prepared readiness for exactly this sort of situation. But before either woman could begin grabbing weapons, another loud bang echoed through room, sound of gunfire followed closely by groan behind them, indicating that pirates had managed break through despite best efforts made thus far at holding line against advancing enemy forces. "Move!" shouted the Zara, immediately pushing Jenny towards pile of weaponry nearest door where they needed to quickly secure position again or risk being overwhelmed almost instantly. She drew out bladed weapon once more, eyes narrowing sharply into predatory stance as she assessed situation rapidly before acting swiftly yet methodically with practiced grace honed over decades. Jenny grabbed whatever looked close enough, a small plasma pistol resting near top of pile, but didn't hesitate for even moment to turn back towards entrance now filled suddenly by several shadowy figures armed with own guns and clearly intent on taking them out. First opportunity presented itself. She fired off rounds quickly while moving fluidly, alongside the Zara, who blocked most attacks coming from remaining attackers, but still required backup in form of additional firepower supplied here. "We need to," began Jenny, trying desperately to find words amidst chaos surrounding her as bullets whizzed past their heads and armor groaned under strain of impacts. Yet before she could even finish forming thought into coherent sentence, the Zara took hit suddenly without warning. A sharp flash of light followed by sound, too muted against background noise, but unmistakable nonetheless. Thex Jenny's voice was choked with sudden fear as Cathari warrior staggered momentarily from impact, but recovered quickly enough to swipe attacker back, while grabbing pistol away and finishing off remaining pirates ruthlessly within seconds. Yet wound visible now on shoulder, where metal armor had cracked under force of direct hit sent waves through her heart. Despite no physical organ there never before felt anything like this kind of pain, even during most grueling battles fought alone against enemy forces. "Get behind me," the Zara gasped sharply, but without loss in tone or control over situation now that immediate threat seemed contained within room. Yet Jenny's eyes were locked onto wound instead, hand reaching out almost instinctively towards armor, where cracks showed faintly beneath protective leather straps crossing intricate patterns designed for maximum protection. "I'm fine," growled the Zara lowly yet without much conviction, even as she waved off concern pressing now from human technician, who wouldn't stop staring at damage done here. "We need to." "Who are you trying to convince?" snapped Jenny fiercely, her grip tightening around pistol in hand, but not for any further combat, instead reaching out carefully towards the Zara's shoulder with other hand, as if afraid that touch would break delicate connection formed between them amidst chaos now surrounding station core. "You're hurt," she stated bluntly yet without judgment or fear despite obvious seriousness of situation here. "We need to take care of yourself first," interrupted the Zara harshly, but not cruelly, voice low and strained, as if pushing back against overwhelming tide threatening to drag her under at any moment now. That shield of combat readiness was breached by injury sustained from unexpected attack. But Jenny's smile remained steady despite everything around them crumbling into chaos. She leaned forward slightly instead, until gaze met directly with dark eyes, reflecting back unspoken understanding beyond words. "We'll get through this together," promised Jenny simply yet without doubt or hesitation ever present in her voice. "No." Something that seemed to resonate deeply within the Zara, who nodded once sharply before turning away towards door leading deeper into station's heart, where remaining defenses awaited them still. "Let's go then," whispered Jenny softly, while reaching out again gently, this time towards armored shoulder, as if reassuring Cathari warrior of shared burden now resting between both shoulders, physical and emotional alike. As they moved together down corridor, once more amidst sounds of battle raging around them. The medical bay was a stark contrast to the chaos outside, its walls sterile and quiet, lit by the cold glow of diagnostic screens. The Xera lay on one of several beds lined up against metal bulkheads that seemed designed for maximum efficiency rather than comfort. The Cathari warrior's armor had been partially removed from her shoulder, exposing a minor wound where blood seeped slowly through punctured skin. "Jenny," a voice called softly behind her back. Jenny turned to see the medical staff moving with practiced ease around the Xera's still body, applying antiseptic and bandaging the shallow wound in silence. "Hun," she replied without breaking eye contact, as one of the medics placed their fingers against sensors on the Zara's neck for a quick check. "You're fine," Jenny added firmly when no answer came from the Xera herself, who remained unnaturally still under medical care and attention that seemed barely noticed. "They'll take good care of her here," murmured one of the medics as they moved to another patient, their movements efficient yet gentle despite urgency in current situation. "You should go get something more substantial than what you've been surviving on." But Jenny didn't budge from her position next to the Zara's bed, where she could see her friend through a haze that still clouded the edges of reality after everything they'd endured together. When the Xara finally stirred, it was with an almost imperceptible twitch at first. The noise inside the medical bay had quietened significantly since their arrival, but Jenny's heart still pounded in time with echoes from battle, yet fade completely. "You got hurt protecting me," Jenny said softly once dark eyes opened and found her face hovering just above the Zara's armored chest, where she'd lain unmoving for what felt like an eternity. The Xara blinked, the first real sign of awareness since being brought here. "You're my friend," came a low growl that was almost a whisper from her cracked lips. "I protect my friends." Jenny's smile was warm despite everything. It seemed to light up even this cold space, dedicated solely to healing bodies battered in service. "That's the sweetest thing any terrifying alien warrior has ever said to me." The Zara turned slightly towards Jenny, who was already reaching into her pockets for something small and round. She held out a skull-shaped keychain that she'd managed to retrieve earlier during their chaotic escape from attacker, something the Xara had taken from her without question, but never return. "You kept my gift," observed Jenny, as if noting an important detail often overlooked in more serious moments between them both. "Of course." A pause followed, filled with a complexity of emotions rarely seen on the face of such a formidable warrior. "It was the first one." Jenny's smile softened further at this acknowledgement. She reached out then and took the Zara's hand gently, squeezing it as if offering reassurance despite her own fear about the Xara being hurt. "I'll get you more," she promised firmly, while raising an eyebrow playfully towards any implied expectations of other kinds of gifts beyond simple trinkets. "And more cookies." The Xara blinked again, but this time with a hint of something softening the edges around her usually unyielding eyes. "I would like that." The words hung in air between them, charged now by unspoken connections forged amidst flames and gunfire, where only friendship had truly held any significance at all. Outside, alarms still sounded distant warnings against further attacks or breaches. Inside, however, this tiny corner of medical bay felt completely untouched, safe enough for both warriors to find solace momentarily, away from harsh realities waiting outside its doors. Yet here in this room, where the Xara's armor had cracked under force, not of battle, but human simplicity, Jenny Walsh and War Commander the Zara found a fragile peace amidst chaos they'd faced together. For sometimes all it took was for one to call another cute, and even the most fearsome warrior could feel their resolve cracking slightly in favor of something more profoundly meaningful. The chapter ended exactly where intended. The warrior, who terrified everyone, had finally found some measure of calm with a single human who merely saw friendship regardless of rank, species or scars, endured side by side.